This episode is sponsored by Shutterstock.com. With over 20 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips, Shutterstock helps you take your creative projects to the next level. For 30% off, head on over to Shutterstock.com and use offer code Gamebreaker7. This episode is also brought to you by Audible. For a free 30-day trial and to receive a free audiobook, just head on over to audible.com/Gamebreaker. What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 8 of Unicorn Duck Shut Up Puppet, the WildStar show for July 15, 2013. You're watching Gamebreaker. I'm Gary Gannon, and we've got a big hint at the business model of WildStar. A stupid, ridiculous amount of quotes from Zam, all that and more. But first, editor-in-chief from Zam.com, Scott Hawks. How are you, sir?
We're just bringing quotes this week. We just backed up a shitload and dropped
there
a
really
lot of
are.
quotes.
It's just
There really
it's the
are, yeah.
week of quotes, and more quotes for WildStar this week. Joining us as always, Mr. Farhan Siddiqui. How are you, sir?
A little bit under the weather this week, but otherwise happy to be back.
All right. Well, we'll get through this hour. Hopefully, you can weather it. All right. Let's get into this because there's so much stuff. First up, Carbine are just, can I say it? Really bad at announcing things. Aren't they? Let's be honest.
We're not going to announce this, but here's what we're going to not announce.
They're worse than me. They just can't keep their mouth shut. I just like blah blah blah. They just
no, if it was you, they'd be showing clips of it.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Oh, I'll just show you a little bit of it over here in the corner.
That's true. All right. I'll blab later on in the show. But so Carbine, so they talked to Rock Paper Shotgun, spoke to Jeremy Gaffney, and it was a really long interview. It's definitely worth checking out. But let's just start it off with quotes. So he said, we're going to reveal in a couple of weeks, basically, because what we really want to do is have a dev speak that talks to it in detail. Okay, sure. Okay. You'll understand what he's talking about in a second. You'll get the context. It's coming up if you're not reading ahead. He says, but if there's a single thing we found, it's that nobody loves a business model. Everybody hates business models. No one's like, I love a subscription game. It's, I hate cash shops, or I hate free-to-play, or I hate subs. So what we want to do is try to be flexible, let people pay how they want to pay, and do a bit more of a hybrid. So it's a hybrid then. And he just announced it.
No, they have used the word. He has used the word hybrid before.
I know they have.
But yeah, pretty much saying, and there was a follow-up with the one we covered with develop, and pretty much saying that they're looking at there's going to be a hybrid. There's going to be basically ways you can choose which way you want to pay, essentially. So yeah.
All right. So
but they're not announcing it yet.
What Farha, for you? What immediately leaps to mind? Free to play with an optional subscription, or what do you kind of take out of that?
I'm thinking it might end up being something like buy to play with an optional subscription kind of thing, just because I feel like this is a major enough game that they're going to have like some sort of box, like the collector's edition for everything else. So I feel like they could pull off a box model rather than just going full straight on free to play. But yeah, I mean, this is really more of like an announcement later on with more details, but here's pretty much like a little vagueness, but we'll go into a lot more detail.
But we'll make sure when we actually do the announcement, there'll be a dev to answer all your questions, and I'll just say things in words about the announcement. Maybe they could... Who said this? Somebody just said this recently. It was kind of funny. Maybe they could make an announcement to announce a website that has like a countdown on it. That'd be fun. Those are always good. An announcement about the... Yeah, we love those. Scott, what comes to your mind immediately? What jumps to mind with this? What do you think the hybrid will be?
It's going to be, you can sub, you can have
Free
to play with a cash shop, you can have, I don't know, I mean, hybrid could be, They could even go, if you have a 12-month sub, you don't have to pay for the box. So there's a lot of variety within.
You think they're going to go straight for the annual pass as well? That'd be a nice one. Why not?
It's an option.
Why not?
You know, I'd do that.
Yeah.
I'd do that. Right? So I don't have to pay 50, 60 up front. All right, I'll do the 12 months. Okay, cool. So you immediately go hybrid. That means it must be box and cash shop GW2 style, or you get a subscription, and so you'll get extra in-game currency. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but it's going to be a mixture of things.
Would you guys consider Guild Wars 2 kind of a hybrid? I mean, it's buy to play, but there is a cash shop.
Yeah.
It's kind of a gray area.
To me, it's always sub model or not is the way I usually define it.
Sub or go home.
Is it sub or not? Basically, is the way I split. So it looks like it's most likely sub's going to be an option, but maybe he's going hybrid. Hey, as I said, could it be hybrid? Is you either buy to play or you don't buy to play. So
what do you think? If they do for subs, what do you think that they would do? What do you think the perks would sort of be if as a sub? Do you think in-game currency towards cash shop items? 'Cause they're not going to just remove the cash shop. There's no way it's like you're a subscriber. There's no cash shop. You get everything. That's not happening.
How about access to like an exclusive subscriber only cash shop so that you can double dip?
Would they do that? Would they do a VIP cash up? I kind of doubt it. I don't know why. It'd be ballsy.
Well, that's it. If you come out straight away and say, right, you can have access to something that others can't.
Then it's yes.
That always goes down well.
There you go.
Gamers love that. When you say, okay, if you're going free to play, that means that you can play the game except for these bits.
Well, I was thinking like different prices, like for the items.
If you get a discount, if you got like you're doing a submodel, that means you get a 20% discount in the cash store. That might be that's an option, but
that works for me.
It's not really been played. It's amazing how this we're talking about hybrid, but it's not really been played around with that much, those ideas in games so far. So there's actually a lot of scope on different directions that could go with.
I mean, do you think there's the possibility, because we don't know yet, so this is a possibility, I guess you could say it is, but do you think they could throw a subscription on top of a box price with a free-to-play option as well, though?
So subscription and box price,
and have a free-to-play version, and have a free-to-play version,
have a free-to-play version. Wow,
piss everybody.
What would they put in the box then?
I don't know. Yeah. I just want to make people angry.
The box is just like you'd open the box up and fireworks shoot out, and music plays, all the rest of it. Yeah. I don't know. I say there's a lot of scope to play with and what a hybrid could actually mean.
What about boxes on shelves in stores with a bunch of free crap in it? Think we're gonna see that? And what about collector's editions?
I hope so.
That's
got to have a collector's edition.
Everyone's
got money. It's printing money. It's like $150 for or whatever. Remember Guild Wars 2? I mean, it's a great collector's box, but it was only like $150 for the collector's edition, if I'm remembering right. So like that's a good revenue source, and people love them. So I'll be amazed. And I have to say that there's lots of things that you could do with like. Could you imagine some of the plushes you could do, and some of the in-game items, and some of there's so much scope with housing and everything, all the in-game items you could have. You could have a special house, collector's edition house that looks like a damn palace.
When is Pixar making the damn movie already? Because they've got all the product they need. They got all the plushies and little cute things that Lucas would be drooling over.
Oh, don't give him somewhere else to try and invade.
I went there. All right, let's move on. So Scott made our job either, I don't know, really hard or really easy this week, because you spoke to not one but two of the Carbine devs. So you spoke to the lead class designer Hugh Shelton and lead combat designer Chris Lynch. There is just a ridiculous amount of good info over there. Definitely worth checking out. Go over to zam.com and check that out. We pulled out a bunch of the highlights to talk about here. So first up, Chris Lynch talked about the introduction of their freeform targeting, which is on everybody's mind. He said, it really changed the dynamic of the spell. Before, I would fight one creature at a time, and I'd just be focused on that one. But as soon as you changed it to an AoE spell with a decal of a line, It instantly changed my behavior as a player. I would start trying to line up multiple Yetis with a line spell. I would start moving my player to exploit it as best as possible. I'd want to get all 3 of those Yetis in a line. So what's more fun than beating on one mob? It's fighting a bunch at a time. But not only is this, it sounds like a lot more fun, more efficient. It's also, it sounds like it's going to be a lot more challenging as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's more, you got more moments. The moment-to-moment control that you have is much more important than in most MMOs. Most MMOs, well, old school MMOs, let's say, that you're locked onto them, and then it's cooldowns. That's all you're bothered about. It's cooldowns, and it takes care of aiming and everything else too. You don't even need to. You can look at people clickers, MMO clickers, who are the how can I put it? They're the shunned section of the MMO player base.
I'm doing that 100% right now in Final Fantasy XIV. I'm a clicker.
Well, you can in that.
I'm playing it properly. I'm playing the game properly. I do something else while I just hold the mouse. I just do something else. I don't want to tell you what I'm doing. Oh, okay.
Good. Please don't.
Okay. But I get it now.
Yeah. And what it's supposed to be is you're typing to players and talking while you're fighting. That's one of the developers of Arcade said that anyway. But moving on. It's the idea. It's just interesting that it used to be a different system, and basically the devs went, we've got this cool telegraph system, and for people who haven't been following the game for that long, it wasn't always this way. It was more of a kind of the normal MMO style, but they had this telegraph system, and then some of the devs went, we spent the weekend kind of looking at doing this for the players as well, and they went, it's great, and then they went, ooh, yeah, this is great, and then the game changed, which is, it's one of the cool things that can happen if you have a real sort of like creative and you have that iterative sort of like design cycle, and you allow designers to go and have fun with what they're doing. They came back and said, hey, look, we think this is cool. They went, oh, cool, we just changed the entire game's basic gameplay. And it works really well. When you play it, it really does. It's really engaging. Having that decal.
And the way it sounds, the way they describe it, what's cool is like I think for players who may be overwhelmed by that, especially like dudes like starting out, it sounds like it's going to sort of be like an optional thing, right? There's nothing to say that you can't just like tag one mob and kind of like you don't have to run around and train like 20 things and kind of do this. So I think a lot of people will be learned not just by one. It sounds like a lot of fun. Farhan, you had something?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely something that is up to the players to be able to judge how difficult they want the content to be. So one thing that as you become a better player, you're going to just want to complete the content faster, so you're just going to end up pulling more and more mobs at the same time, and you're going to be able to actually manage that by having these AoE details. You'll improve as a player. It also puts in more necessity for skills like crowd control and other things in normal gameplay, because you're going to want to actually be able to use those abilities rather than maybe when you're normally questing in like WoW or something, like how often do you really need to stun or use those other abilities?
I think if you think about other games too, what's really interesting about this whole model is like in other games, it was kind of like classes like mages, AoE, area of effect farming used to cost like tons of rage in other games. This actually sounds like it's going to be the norm. Like this is going to sort of be like the normal way to play the game.
I think there's certainly more of that, but there's also the way that the mobs. I know with E3 when I played, I noticed that some of your mobs, when you clicked on them, you knew that it was going to be more than one. So the game's designed so that kind of game style is kind of included in there. The mobs work with each other, so you're going to have to be kind of figuring that out when more than one pack of mobs coming at you. So it's not just you're grabbing one at a time and then rounding them all up and killing them all. Like it's going to be down to they're going to come at you at times in more than one anyway, of course, because they've got linked sort of pack mentalities. But also it's down to how difficult it's going to be. And they've already said this isn't going to be always one of those MMOs you can just steamroller through without thinking to max level. So if you're pulling tons of mobs, there's a good chance you're going to get your backside handed to you anyway, because it's not going to be that easy.
All right, Hugh Shelton on targeting abilities or targeted abilities. He had this to say. He said, "It's a fine line to walk. We do have certain targeted abilities still in the game, and most of them are on the heal side. It varies on a class-by-class basis. Some of our classes are more focused on the free-form target aspect, so that's going to mean they're going to have a bit of a higher skill cap in that you are moving around, avoiding enemy telegraphs, and lining up your own skill shots. So we have different places for players of different skill levels to fit into." And we actually talked about that. I don't know, last episode or the one before, we talked about the concern over healing being a lot trickier in WildStar with the freeform nature of things. I guess the solution is, in most cases, don't do that. I don't.
Well, what they mean, I think, is that it's a little bit easier if you give players an option so that they don't have to completely rely on using freeform targeting for their heals. You know, you can have some heals be freeform targeted and then other ones be more reliable and sort of try to balance that.
You know what I really like about this quote? If you look at the rest of the quote, it's he sort of implies that certain classes are going to require more or less skill, and I really like that. I mean, you're seeing this in more other games, right? I mean, like League, for instance, comes to mind. Like League of Legends, they're totally open to that. You know, Syndra is definitely harder to play than like Annie, and it's communicated right to the player. Do you guys think that WildStar is actually going to do that right up front into the player, like when you're at character creation, tell you the difficulty level?
I wouldn't think so. I think also what's implied within it is how you build your abilities together will decide on the difficulty for you. So remember, basically, WildStar's going for this sort of deck building idea that's popular now in MMOs, that you've only got a limited amount of space and you have to choose your abilities you can use. So it might be that if you want to, you can perhaps go for more, targeted abilities rather than free-form abilities to help supplement you if you're having problems with that. So it could be, you could perhaps even choose in a say you're a healer and you're having problems with one type of heal, so you're switching one that's more targeted to supplement that one instead. So it makes you as a healer, it's easier to play as a healer rather than, and then maybe you feel you're an expert and so you use more of the free-form ones because you feel that they're more powerful or suit the situation better. So perhaps it might be classes, some classes might be a bit easier, but I think it's also mixing up the abilities within them will decide the difficulty for you.
What do you think, Farhan?
Yeah, I think I think it's almost inevitable that one of the healers is going to be a little bit easier than other ones just because of the way that the class mechanics are different. So it's not like they all have the same mana mechanic. I mean, like, I guess I don't really know a lot of details about it, but I mean, maybe they do have mana. But I do think that different classes have different other mechanics on top of mana that they're using, and so at the very least, one of those is probably going to be a little bit easier to heal with. That's just from experience in other MMOs. It always ends up happening. But yeah, I do agree with Scott. It probably is going to be something where you're going to be able to build your limited action set so that, depending on how confident you are in your ability to land those freeform targeted spells, you may or may not add in more targeted ones.
All right, I want to talk more about healing, but first up, I want to tell you guys about a great deal we got going on with Audible for a free 30-day trial and to get a free audiobook. All you got to do is use that URL right there on your screen, audible.com/Gamebreaker. And I'm checking out this week, The Verdant Passage. It's another Dungeons & Dragons book.
Most slaves were human, dwarven, or half-elven, but other, more exotic races dominated several terraces. On one level, an entire pack of Belgoi labored. These gaunt humanoids were nearly identical to men, save for their broadly webbed feet, clawed fingers, and the toothless mouths with which they chattered. The next level held 100 Gith, a grotesque humanoid race that seemed half-elf, half-reptile. They were lanky like desert elves, with long, slender legs, but their legs protruded from the body at right angles, like a lizard's. The Gith were so hunched at the waist that they shambled in a perpetual squat. Their bony heads were slender and arrow-shaped, with bulging, lidless eyes that remained fixed on
boneless, lidless eyes. Check it out, the Dark Sun series. Highly, highly recommended. Just started book 1. It's about 9 hours on the audiobook of book 1, and you can download this for free by signing up today and go to audible.com/Gamebreaker. So you get a free 30-day trial. You download the app, put it on your iPhone, your iOS device, your Android, whatever you got. and download one free audiobook just by using the URL audible.com/Gamebreaker. Check that one out. It's called The Verdant Passage. It's part of the Dungeons and Dragons series, and that is Dark Sun, Prism Pentad, Book 1. That is Book 1. So I think there's 8, I believe, in this series. I think it's 8. I don't know, but that is Book 1. Definitely check it out. Go over today, audible.com/Gamebreaker. All right, so let's get back to we're talking about healing in WildStar, and Hugh had this to say. He said, a number of our heal abilities are still targeted. We've been moving further and further away from the target abilities. As we come up with good ways to make freeform versions of target abilities, we move them over to en masse to the new version. Not en masse meaning Terra, just, en masse. Little MMO humor for you there. MMO stand-up. Think there's any place for that? You can get a job doing stand-up. MMO humor.
It'd be a very small audience.
Probably.
Yeah.
As we talked about it, though, right now, these healers definitely are going to have more targeted abilities as of now. It sounds as if they're just working at trying to find more and more ways to make this free form. I think that's a very good thing. It's going to be really interesting. Does that mean they're not as concerned about heals being harder to land and more concerned about just making the ability work well?
Oh yeah, I mean, they don't want to sort of mess up a healing class by making it such that it's not even possible to play because it's just too hard and it's not viable at all. So obviously they're going to need to, as they come up with ways to like, oh, okay, maybe we can change this ability in this way, and then now it can be a free-form targeted spell, whereas before it was a targeted spell. Then they're going to be so that might be something like, before it was a channeled spell and or like a cast time spell, but then in order for it to be freeform, it needs to be instant cast or something like that. So they might need to like rebalance things or change things in different ways in order to actually make it viable for it to actually work as a freeform spell. They can't just, let's just make it an AoE and then assume everything will work fine.
Hugh also talked about tanking abilities. He said some of our more interesting abilities on tanks are abilities that affect your group and that you have to stay within a certain range to keep them active. We're experimenting more with our tanking, and so you might see more of those spells where you do actively target allies, as you might see healers actively targeting allies. Scott, what are you expecting here on this? Like some sort of like, I don't know, aura spells, shield spells, leap to ally spells, that sort of thing?
Yes. I want all of those.
All of that.
Yes. I basically, when I was asking questions on the call, it was a case of trying not to make it all about tanking, because that's where I like to play. But what he said is, at the moment, it is like an aura. It is essentially an aura where it makes it interesting because you've got to, of course, keep your positioning based on where you have the boss, but then also you've got to make sure you've got your positioning in relation to your distance to the rest of the raid. So even if you have, say, healers at the back or DPS at the back or wherever, and they're going to be moving around a lot in this game, more than perhaps in others even, you've got to make sure that you're within that vicinity. So you might have to actually have your tank moving the boss around more than you might usually want them to. Because if you go back to sort of like the original old school MMO, tanking is you get the tank in a corner and the boss's face shoved into it, and so his backside's pointing towards everybody else. But that might not work quite as easily because that aura spell might be important for the rest of the raid. So yeah, at the moment it's about distance, but I'd love to see things where, I mean, how many times I've been in raids and I've gone, God, I wish that person knew how to take care of his threat. And if I had a targetable threat decreaser, like straight off, so I see someone who's taking like aggro off me, I could go, stop it, and that stops right away. But then, of course, you'd have raids going, you'd have lazy DPS expecting tanks to do all of their threat management for them, which they kind of do anyway.
Finally, Hugh had to say this. He said, we're experimenting with certain things. One of our beta players actually created an auto hotkey script where you are able to play WildStar as a full mouse look game. We have players in the company who are experimenting with being able to toggle on and off mouse look. We're not saying we're launching with that, but we'll see how it goes. currently find yourself holding down the right mouse key a lot as you're playing because you don't have to worry about selecting targets that much. Implemented or not, I think there'll be an add-on for this, especially with the way this combat sounds. It almost sounds like that would be the way you'd want to play. So I would definitely probably play with full mouse look.
Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely one of the options that I think people would like.
So Zam and who else was this? A couple other sites went to the developer conference in Brighton,
yes,
UK.
It was our man Gareth Harmer went. He travelled down to good old Brighton, and there was a couple of Kai Dream was there with her YouTube channel, and there was a few other WildStar Core was there, and a few other fan sites were there as well.
All right, you know what that means though. More quotes. Here we go.
Yes, lots of quotes.
Jeremy Gaffney started off with this. He said, in an MMO, patches are expensive and hard, and changing things out without screwing up everything else is hard. You need to develop flexibility very early on, and I don't see every game doing it, because frankly, it's freaking hard to just get a game out the door. Never mind being easily tunable on the dev side, having a world that supports it, having the tech that supports it, or the processes to do it without shooting yourself in the foot. I take it WildStar have a flexible system then. Apparently. It's the communication that...
Because if not, it's freaking hard.
It's freaking hard.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's on the concept. I mean, what's been the big buzzword since Guild Wars 2? Dynamic. It's got to be dynamic. It's got to change. Dynamic content. Dynamic content. Have they given any more insight into how that whole tech side of it works?
Well, what I like at that's from the... Gareth had a lot of writing to do over the weekend, because that's from the second part, and the third part just went up, and he talks more about the dynamic part of it. And what I really like is he talked about dynamic and how they haven't gone crazy and said, hey, look, it's dynamic, when he talks about like a spaceship crashing and that changes everything. And he says the reason we haven't talked about it being dynamic is it's only really dynamic when you play it through again, because when you're leveling up, you don't really give a crap about all that. You're just leveling up. So you're not going back to the same bit just to see if it's changed since. So the only way it'll really change for you is if you go back and play through it again maybe on a different character, or you just happen to be there for something else. Go, that's changed. So they're not saying, hey, everybody, it's dynamic. Way! It's all there, but they're not putting that as the big sell for them, because they don't feel from a player's point of perspective that it's actually a massive difference for them until they've played through it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it does make sense. It does actually really make a lot of sense in that. But you can see how dynamic, as you said, is a big catchword. But they're really playing that down, saying, "Yeah, we've got all that in there, but it's not something that the players. It's going to make that much difference to them moment to moment while playing the game. So why would we jump up and down and say, hey, everybody, look at this? Because it's not something you're going to notice, but it is going to be part of their world. So I think that's really smart. But on the tech side, it's all about those plugs. The built-in engine, the whole world, so you can take plugs out, put plugs in. You've got to be really careful how you say that. And what content that's going to create when you can switch that in and out as at will as they seem to be able to.
All right, next up, Jeremy had this to say. He said, go back a decade and the largest team size that existed was probably 40 or 50 people. Now will be 300 plus by launch. You look at SWTOR. I don't know their exact numbers, but their team was 350 to 400, and that's hundreds of millions of dollars in development cost. Very few people have run a 300-person team before and run it well. Most MMOs don't come out in less than a 5-year cycle. Most are about 7 or 8. I was sort of surprised. I mean, I didn't know how big the team was. I haven't gone over and met the team, though, but I don't know, Farhan, were you surprised at that 300 number? WildStar is about 300 at launch?
I mean, like, the last I had heard it was 200, so I guess they're scaling up pretty quick. And that was only a few months ago, so I guess they're just in the hiring frenzy here, like, ramping up towards launch. But yeah, I mean, WildStar really sort of gives off the feel, because they aren't really pushing the hype as hard as they could be, I think, of it not being like a huge game or something, but it really is like a big production.
I think the reason there's so many, you also later on talks about the cadence. I mean, Guild Wars 2, like
Ooh, that's the buzzword of 2013. Cadence. I forgot about
cadence.
Dynamic and cadence are the two words that you need to put in all of your press releases if you're.
And Jeremy specifically, when he's talking to Gareth, specifically talked about what Guild Wars 2 is doing at the moment, what it's rumored about. He says what's rumored that World of Warcraft's doing about the way they're going to be delivering. He's saying having a 3-month turnaround isn't good enough anymore. It's just not good enough. And he was talking about the beta right now is they're basically learning how to put out fixes and patches at a good speed. And he says, like, we're going to aim for like 3, and then if we get 4, then okay, but hopefully we might get 1 or 2, and that'll be a win, like every 1 to 2 weeks rather than 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And saying they're learning to do that now through the beta, so they're going to try and carry on doing that and hit the ground running when it launches. So they're going to need a large team before launch and after launch if they're going to have such a high turnaround on producing fixes and content.
Scott, one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beta.
I can't say it. Beta. I know. I just can't do it anymore.
Next up!
I do it.
Jeremy says, one of the things we want to do is make sure that we announce our worst kept secrets earlier rather than later. Now that makes total sense. Now everything else makes sense. Earlier than later. Earlier than they anticipate even announcing. We're going to be doing a big reveal along those lines at Comic-Con, specifically about the races. So, about those Chua. Big reveal.
Shh. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. We're really bad at announcing stuff, or we're just doing this completely on purpose. But we can look forward to the other unannounced race at Comic-Con. I would think it's going to get, hopefully.
He said there's like a list of like 200 things to basically be information to be released, and they're on about 40. I'm pretty sure that's what it said. So it's because they go, right, we're getting this stuff out of the way first that we just can't keep the secret on, and then work through the rest. But it sounds like there's plenty left that they haven't talked about yet. So maybe they're not being too worried about being top secret with this because they've got so much else, other stuff that they've still got to talk to, that this isn't really too big a deal.
They've got so much. They've got 200 things they're talking about at Comic-Con alone. They're going to release 200.
That's it. They're just going to sit down with a big PowerPoint just full of bullet points.
All right. Coming up at number 200. All right. Coming in at 199. All right. Coming in at 198. Next up, Jeremy said, on the other hand, what's the MMO that's catered to the elder game crowd and do the hardcore stuff at top level? None. Most of the time you rush your game out because there's some guy with a checkbook sitting behind you going, hey, now's a great time to ship. And I know you haven't really done that rating stuff. Why don't you cram that in a month or 2 after launch? Says, guess what? That doesn't work. Really? That doesn't work? Damn, everyone should probably stop doing that then, shouldn't they? It's probably...
That's that. I'm sure there has been maybe a game or 2 where that's happened before, isn't it? When
I don't know.
they've maybe released without any endgame content ready.
It apparently doesn't work.
It was fine, though. It was no problem. Everybody loved it.
Talking about keeping combat diverse, Jeremy had this to say. He said, you'll learn a trick in an area to go defeat these monsters. Now, if you do see it later, you're doing it in an area where there's still honey. There's honey all over the ground because it's near a giant beehive. The bees harvest the honey, then they build a nest, and that makes them more powerful. But you get stuck in the honey, so dodging around in that area is very different than before. And I will pull this one out because I mean this is just one example, right? About about the action combat. But if they can keep this up, if this becomes diverse enough where it doesn't become repetitive and you start seeing the patterns over and over, but there's enough variety to this, that actually could really make a lot of leveling up a lot interesting, especially if you're kind of going through certain types of mobs, even if they're similar, right? Like the whole action combat, your movement, now you're dodging, the telegraph system, and you've got this now added effect of things like, slows and just shit on the ground, like whatever. It sounds like
working against you.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. Do we know of any other examples besides this honey one?
Not
I mean, we've seen that clip where the people are like fighting monsters in a minefield, and then they like try to have the monsters run over the mines, and then or like there's also one where there's like this big cannon or something shooting in an area, and so like if it targets you, then it suddenly the telegraph turns red, and then it's going to shoot you. But if you have like a mob in that area, then it hits that thing. So there's things like that where there's like environmental hazards and things going on, and you can have the monsters hit that. And they've also talked about like having, some monsters might not like other monsters, so if you like sort of train them towards other ones, then they might start fighting each other as well, and so you can use that to your advantage. So I think what they're talking about is basically like keeping the gameplay fresh, not necessarily by having to make the developers add more content, but just making the content layered so that you can play. You sort of experience different things, and the interactions are what makes the gameplay a lot more fresh.
There is also like the water. Like rivers actually have currents, so you have to swim against the current, and it can
punch fish.
Can move you. You can punch fish. We have fish. If they have a dog as well, they win. It's great. There's another in joke. So like if you're up against a monster and you're fighting in the river, and with the way that you have to aim and the water's actually moving you around, that adds a difficulty level to it. So it actually makes a difference whether you're on land or in the water, which is cool. So I like that.
All right, talking about the difficulty of raids, I think this is going to make a lot of people watching this show extremely happy, because we know you guys mostly are the hardcore of the hardcore. So Jeremy had this to say. He said, "We're going to make them all hard to start. Here's the thing, though. I think something is lost if you have easy mode in a raid, where there's something about having it so hard that you just have to be the best to get there." He says, "And over time, I suspect we'll loosen up on that a bit, but at launch, I'd rather be too hard than too easy." So it sounds as if there's not going to be like multiple modes to the raids. Like, it doesn't sound like you're going to have like, an easy raid, hardcore, and like a nightmare mode, nothing like that, like we've seen in other games. I don't know. What do you think casual raiders are going to think of this, though? Who want to see all the content?
The variety of difficulty is actually going to come, and this is something else he said when he talked to Gareth, that that's going to come from the weekly random factor, like Attractor. So what's going to happen is some weeks it's going to be ridiculously hard, and only the very best of the best of the best of guilds will be able to finish it that week. And then other weeks, you'll get, because as I said, the plugs go in and out, raids change on a weekly basis if you haven't seen the show before or don't know it. So that means that some weeks it might be that it's perfectly doable for your sort of average raiding guild to be able to complete it. But then the next week, they just haven't got a shot because it's changed up again, and the raid's now harder. So there isn't an easy mode, as in you're going to go in, it's going to be the same raid, but you can choose which mode you're going to do in. But some weeks it will be easier than others. So there's kind of
what does that really accomplish, though? What does that accomplish besides make me have to really organize like my calendar?
In what way?
I mean, you won't know which week is going to be easy and which one's going to be hard, so you can't like plan that out ahead of time or something like that.
It's just that whenever you come in, you find out what the raid's going to be that week when you go in there, basically. So,
if it's on a week by week basis, isn't there just going to be a website that just says like, kind of keeps track of all of them on a week by week basis, and you're just going to go look and just be like, oh, it's all right, this week it's easy, let's go, guys. Now we got to clear our schedules and go raid because
we're like, one of the things that they talked about in terms of the rewards was that, not all the rewards would necessarily just be from killing the boss. It would also be relative to how you do relative to all the other guilds or, I guess, raid groups that are attempting the bosses. So even if you're like in one of those casual guilds, even if you can't finish all of the content that you do get through, you'll still be rated against other ones, and then you'll get rewards based on that. So you still want to attempt, even if it is a pretty hard setup, and you don't think that you'll actually be able to do it, just because you want to try your best so that you can get the rewards that you will be able to get.
Yeah, there's someone said in chat, and it's a very good point, saying that if you're an average guild and that if you go in and only say 1 week out of 5, you're able to actually complete it, that you're going to have a lot of trouble keeping those guilds together. But that's on a sort of standard old idea of what a raid is, where you go in and you either win or you don't. If you've got gradations of success, then it means that you can have, perhaps even have some get so far within it, and you'll be ranked on that, and your guild will still have done some kind of achievement. Then I think that'll help offset that issue. But yeah, it is a thing that I have to make sure that that if you want a certain standard of guild to go in, that they're going to feel like they can make some progress, like on a semi-consistent basis. But then it comes down to how difficult do you want it? Do you want it so it is basically making it so even for the so-called easy weeks, it's going to still be tough.
Still be tough.
So, yeah.
I mean, when I just to kind of document it in the show, so it's a living document. That as soon as I read that quote, the chat room completely blew up with people going like, "Yes, we did it!" Like they're so happy that finally a developer is like thinking of them. So I want their voice to be heard. So we lose the chat when people watch this. So WildStar devs, they were extremely happy. Why do you think that he talks about loosening up over time on some of this stuff? And I almost wondered why, because the first thing I thought of was like, well, won't that naturally sort of happen anyway? Yeah. Like as players level up, gear, things like that. Like, so will they really have to kind of make an easy mode potentially down the road over time? Does it even need to exist? Just wouldn't it just naturally kind of happen?
I don't think it's just it's much about easy mode, just about tuning, really. And I think that's where he's talking about there when he's talking about when we come out of the gate at launch, when we tune in this, we'd rather come out too hard than too easy. And whenever they spoke about this previously, especially Jeremy's always talked about, people are going to get to do it because, the gear is going to get better and eventually they'll be able to go through this stuff and they'll improve and so on. And he says, and that's essentially the way they see it going, but they don't want to just give it to them. So I think in that case, it was simply he's talking about the tuning to it, and he'd just rather have it tuned to be more difficult. If they were going to make an error, they'd rather make an error on the side of too hard than making it too easy when they're launch.
All right. Our producer thought he was done, but there's more quotes to come. First, I want to take a quick break and tell you guys about Shutterstock. I'm so happy to have these guys on. Shutterstock, if you don't know what Shutterstock is, they have stock footage, stock photography, stock artwork, all kinds of stuff that you can license from amazing artists, videographers, directors, artists, all kinds of stuff to use for your website, your video project, whatever you got. We use Shutterstock on a daily basis. We have a new YouTube channel, Super Mega Awesome Time. So go to youtube.com/Super Mega Awesome Time and sub on that, or go over to Gamebreaker.tv, watch us smash. And we were looking for some icon artwork, and we use these little guys right here. But there's just tons of this stuff. I mean, there's so many things. I just go through here and I find so many things that I make, like they're called light boxes, and basically you can save stuff for later. And I'll just be looking for different things for the website and shows and stuff like that. And I'll find cool stuff like this, and I don't even know what I'm going to use this for yet, but I am definitely going to use this because it's a little hard to see on here. Let me see if I can blow it up. But these guys are just, I mean, this is like a little blurry because I'm blowing it up on my
Gamebreaker Nation right there.
But how cool are these, right? Like that's some great style right there for a bunch of knights and guys like, there's archers and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, this is like totally stuff we could use for Gamebreaker Nation. I mean, maybe these could possibly become like the form icons or something on the forums, where different levels of, what rank you are, you might get a different icon. I don't know. I just saved those because those were super cool. We also have a new website coming that I just thought of this morning, because I wake up in the morning and I just go, we need a new website. Let's do it. And everyone says, you're effing crazy.
We haven't done one in days. We need to get another one out. Quick.
We haven't started a new website this week. We need another one. We do. I guess, should I announce it? I guess it's a WildStar show, so I guess I can.
You can do a sort of halfway announcement.
Yeah. Well, we don't really have announcements, so there'll be a Cube World website coming from Gamebreaker, and I need to go on Shutterstock and start looking for artwork. So yes, so right after the show, actually, I'm going to be working on the website because we're getting it spun up right now. CubeNation.tv for anybody looking for it. It's probably parked, but all right, the cat's out of the bag. CubeNation.tv. It's going to be an all Cube World website. Wait. It's going to kick ass. But I'm right after this, I'm going to be actually probably going on Shutterstock and looking to kind of figure out what kind of logo. I'm going to do like a logo modifier. We use the Gamebreaker logo for everything, but then we do these little modifiers like on freetoplay.tv. We found that little guy, found it on Shutterstock. We're going to do the same thing for this one. I'm not really sure yet what we're going to do, but I'll look around and kind of come up with something. Maybe next show I'll show you guys exactly what the piece of artwork is on Shutterstock. But we use this on a daily basis. So if you guys have YouTube videos and you maybe do Let's Plays, things like that, you want to do like lower thirds, graphics, even like video files for intros and stuff, you should check out Shutterstock. You should give it a search and look at some of their packages they have, because they have a lot of stuff that just, unless you're a professional like After Effects artist or Photoshop person, you can't make this stuff. So go check it out. I want to save you guys 30% off. All you got to do is go over to shutterstock.com, make a new account. It's good for new accounts, and use the promo code Gamebreaker7. Use that promo code and you're going to save 30% off on your account. It is just a great service. Check it out. We use it constantly. All right, so our producer Dom really thought his job was over at this point, was going to wrap up the show, and then it was like, no! Zam put up more content, and then he cried. And then I said, okay.
He actually said, no more cards, can't take any more cards. And I said, hey, look, there's some more cards, and he wept.
Yep. He was like,
I almost felt bad for him.
I know. I didn't. So this is part 2 from the Quote Fest from Brighton, right?
Yes.
And there's a part 3 coming, or did that actually go up already?
That went up in the last 2 hours. Yes.
Can't keep up with them. Can't even keep up with Zam. So first up, I'm just gonna blow through some of these things. A few little things. Little thing. Explorers get jump boots. Yeah. Don't know why anybody would care about that. Not sure. Can somebody serious? No, can I be serious? Why is this not highlighted in big, massive red text as the Explorer's #1 selling point? Like, is that not what everybody wanting to play that class wants? Like, who doesn't want freaking jet boots?
I like jet boots.
Who doesn't?
Cool.
Who doesn't? I would be like flashing this like a goddamn neon sign, like a car wash on the website if I was them. Wouldn't you? I mean, it's like I'm looking at chat room and I say, what? I want what? Like people are just like, I don't know, crazy. All right. Next up, they said when it comes to RP servers and potential rule sets, that seems to be absolutely very much still up in the air. It seems like they're open to feedback though, right? And that they're listening to the community on this one, and they're just kind of taking a wait and see how much actual interest there is in that stuff. So if you're watching this and you really are looking for an RP server or some potential rule sets out there, I guess I would advise you to somehow be vocal. Get out there, leave comments, get on the forums, like start making some petitions. I don't know, because they obviously are waiting to see and they want to see what kind of traction you guys can get. So I would start getting loud.
Over on all our websites that we're all involved with, and then other ones like fan sites like WildStar Central, places like that, say, hey, we want this, because the problem is with role playing is testing role playing in beta. It's kind of hard because you got to stand around and watch people role playing, which is a bit of a difficult thing to do if you're busy like making a game. So yeah, you need to make sure that you're vocal and that the devs know that there's enough people who want that set to make it viable to make it.
And
well, it's exactly what it is that they need to be able to roleplay properly. So, something as simple as like what was the MMO recently that didn't have like sitting on chairs?
That would be Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Yes.
And they actually don't have chat bubbles, so that actually makes it kind of hard to roleplay as well when you don't have chat bubbles. So chat bubbles and sitting. Hopefully it's in. This is interesting. Numbers are actually going to be allowed in player names, which I think makes complete sense, especially since they have a robotic race.
In the car,
cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. Just wanted to point that out. And on the quotes, Jeremy Gaffney is back up with another quote. Here it is. He says, for instant PvP, it's easy because we make sure each of the paths has compelling things to do on each of the battlegrounds. Settlers are a part of that. It's natural to build outposts. We do this in the regular world anyway. Build outposts, build respawn points, some things that are free to place and drop wherever you want. Some things are, hey, go unlock this piece of the battlefield. I mean, because of the possibilities of settlers building stuff in battlegrounds, do you guys think that this implies like a pretty damn large battleground? It sounds like this is going to be pretty big. they can't be. This map's got to be pretty substantial.
I mean, settlers alone, but if you think settlers means you can have a large map, explorers having something viable to do means it's going to be a large map probably as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not that you need a massive space for explorers, you just got to have certain elements with it that need discovery that having an explorer is useful for. And then scientists with their scanning equipment, can, you know, there's a lot of stuff there. But you're thinking that this isn't going to be a small map. No, this isn't going to be, you know, two rooms at the end of a long corridor and people running down the middle of them beating each other senseless. It's going to be quite big to get all of this fit in there.
How far do you think they'll actually take this?
I mean, it's definitely one of my biggest worries as far as paths go in PvP and how that plays into it, because, like, I mean, you could say, like, okay, settlers are going to become, like, the thing that you need the most if they're actually building significant defenses, like turrets or something like that everywhere. But, I mean, you could balance it out by saying, like, okay, no, you also need explorers to do these things that are important, and you also need soldiers to do these things that are, and so forth, and give every path a role they can play. But then, like, I get worried that's, like, okay, does that mean that my battle group composition needs to have, like, this many soldiers and this many settlers, and so now on top of having, like, a class composition, I also need a path composition for my group. So I'm a little bit wary going into it. I think that they can't go overboard with making, like, path gameplay be too important in Battlegrounds, because it'll just complicate composition so much.
Complicate and possibly, like, not really. I don't use the word exploit, but it could just become a real cluster F. If, like, it's gonna be interesting to see how they sort of balance that out and how they put restrictions on how that all works, since they're kind of giving it to, you know, I don't know, possibly building, who knows, walls, obstacles, who knows what you could build in there. I mean, that'd be hilarious, but
you can't make it the focus of it, because, of course, the PvP is supposed to be the focus of it. But having something cool to do that your path means that it's not just this tertiary thing that is you just don't get any use out of, I think it's a smart idea.
So talking about and seeing telegraphs in group settings, Jeremy had this to say. He said, it's when you get into large group settings when you can use it to communicate. It's actually off by default, although we'll probably change it to be on. He says, the fact that you can hold down a button and say, I'm about to do this bad thing or this good thing, helps a lot for communication, because you can't do that over voice chat. You can't do that through text for sure. This, again, is something that I think just it takes away some of our concerns with healing, right? I mean, the healer can easily prepare a spell, and then the friendly telegraph will show up, and the tank will know not to move or to move, regardless.
Over here, quick!
Get over
move.
here, get in the green stuff.
Yeah.
Am I crazy though, or did we hear about this being way too busy in a raid, or was that in reference, like, to only friendly offensive telegraphs? Because that would make sense, but
I think that they always said that you were going to be able to see at least the healing telegraphs, because that's something that's really important for healers to be able to communicate to people, like, this is where you need to stand in order to be healed.
Not in the red stuff. All right, next up. It says, one of the advantages of a limited action set is it gives us the freedom to say, this is a PvE only or PvP only ability. Logic applies too. Taunts generally don't work in PvP. You can do something similar where you can say, hey, I'm going to cast a buff on you, or a debuff that says you do extra damage to me but less damage to everyone else. He says you could do that kind of trick to give an effective taunt, but one of the benefits is that not every skill has to work in every place, which gives us more skill diversity. Interesting way to put it. Instead of saying, yeah, you can taunt debuff in PvP, it's useful. He's basically saying, well, you could do that, but you probably don't want to.
Well, I mean, he's saying that you could try to make abilities compellingly different between PvE and PvP, but what's also just, if you have a limited action set, then some abilities are just going to be better in PvE or better than PvP, so why not just go all the way and say, okay, this is a PvP ability, you know, you're not going to use it in PvE or vice versa.
How do you feel about the separation? The separation of PvP and PvE abilities?
Well, I mean, like, even as far as, like, World of Warcraft, they always had, like, stuff like, you know, like, really long cooldown stuff you can't use in an arena or something like that. So they've always had, like, some aspect aspects of it, I think it makes sense if you have a limited action set. The players are already going to pick like the best PvP abilities and the best PvE abilities, so it's not as much of a push to say like, okay, no, just like you can't use this one at all in the other one. I have no problem with the limited action set. It's a bit more complicated when you have like such a huge action bar and you're like, okay, no, you can't use this now.
Finally, he says, at the cost of having a lot more armor sets and more animations, you can have more racial diversity. Most games recently have not had much racial diversity in terms of skeletons versus us, who do unique animations per race that feels good. It feels very different race to race, but you have to pay that price somewhere, and weapon variance is one area you have to pay that price. He says, we've cracked the armor thing. We have a set of things that rejigs all the armor for all the other races relatively inexpensively. And so that makes sure that we still have a high amount of armor variance, even with big racial differentiation. I mean, this is why, I guess, so this is the reason why classes in WildStar are only going to have one weapon type, though. And I'm wondering, what do you think most gamers are going to feel about? How do you guys feel about that? I mean, ignoring the design decisions, like, as a, you know, more as a player, how do you feel about that?
I mean, gut reaction for me would be that you know, it's a little bit disappointing because I always like being able to like change up the way it looks significantly by going from one, like, if I was a warrior, you know, like always having a sword is a little bit boring for me. Like I just personally like maces better. I think they look cooler than a lot of the swords do. But so yeah, I mean, it's a little bit disappointing, but I mean, as long as they really go in with the animations and make them really polished, and they actually like have like a significant variance in the kinds of models that they have for that weapon. So like, not all swords look like exactly the same, which I think we've seen like a good amount of concept art from that interview that they had with the art director a couple weeks back. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing, but hey, if the animations are much better, then I guess that's a trade-off.
What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I have to say I'm used to the idea like a warrior is a master of like all weapons, so yeah, I'm used to having that sort of variety. But there's going to be a lot of variety down to, let's say, the set of abilities you use and the animations that come from that. So you're going to be able to mix things up a bit just in how things move and the flow and the animations that you see on the screen. But yeah, I like the idea of being able to have a lot of different like weapon shapes and types of weapons. But if it means that you're trading that off and it's going to look more awesome with what you have than it would otherwise, then it's a decent trade-off.
All right, let's move on to some viewer questions. If you guys have questions for the UDSP crew, send them over to submit@gamebreaker.tv. And we love video questions. So if you got a video question, post it up on YouTube and shoot us the link. Keep it around 30 seconds or so, and we'll play it on air. That is submit@gamebreaker.tv. We only got one question this week. It's from Martin Hansen. He says, will there be several planets as in SWOTOR or only one big as in WoW? Oh. What's up, Jeremy? What's up, bro? Hang on.
Jeremy's back to ask a question.
There
He's
it
just
is.
been dominating the show today.
He is. He says, Martin says, will there be several planets as in SWOTOR or only one big as in WoW? I get mixed signals. It all seems to be on one planet, but it's all in alien space, and there seem to be several ships flying around with the path video taking place on a space station. Do we have any confirmation on this? Do we have an answer?
Sorry, go ahead, Father.
Is it one of the 200 things?
Probably. So the main focus of the story is on Nexus because that's like, you know, where the Elden are from, and you sort of want to figure out what happened to them and all of the other things. But they have said that, you know, you're going to be going out to like, you know, the space stations around it, or maybe like a moon or something like that. So there's a lot of potential for them to actually branch out away from Nexus and see like you know, asteroids or other things that are going on around. But yeah, definitely it's going to be like, you know, multiple continents on Nexus is the main focus for now.
Farhan Siddiqui, follow him on the Twitter at Unindel, UNINDEL, and of course come over here every single Monday at 1 PST to watch Unicorn Duck Shadow Puppet. Always a pleasure, sir. Scott Hawks, editor-in-chief over at Zam.com, where we got all those amazing quotes today. Go over and check that out. 3-part series, just massive, massive info dump on WildStar, so go read that. And of course, go to Zam.com. You can follow Scott on Twitter at Jaramore. That is Jarimr. Something like that. Yeah, sure. Always a pleasure, sir.
Andrew,
you can follow me at Gary Gannon, follow Gamebreaker TV at Gamebreaker TV, and make sure you come over for the live show. Like I said, every Monday, 1 PST is when we do it. It's a lot of fun, and thank you so much for watching, and CubeNation.tv. Whoops, did I say that? I don't know. Have a great week.